The sun was low in the sky, turning the desert into a sea of orange and gold. Daniel wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked back from the small store in town, carrying a bag of spare bolts and wires for his workshop. The air was dry and the wind carried fine grains of sand that clung to his clothes. Life in this quiet desert town was simple. Daniel liked it that way. Just him, his workshop, and the engines he repaired for anyone who needed help. But that evening, something unusual caught his eye. Far out in the open sand, where there were no roads or buildings, something metallic was reflecting the sunlight. At first, he thought it might be an old satellite part or a piece of junk from the nearby military testing zone. Curiosity pulled him closer. As he walked toward it, the shape became clearer. It wasn't junk. It was a sleek, silver craft, unlike anything he had ever seen. It was long and smooth, almost like it had been carved from a single piece of metal. The surface shimmered faintly, as if it was made from liquid light. Its front was half buried in the sand, and small lines of smoke rose from its sides. Beside the craft stood a woman. She was tall and slender, her posture both graceful and strong. She wore a torn silver cloak that fluttered slightly in the breeze, and her boots looked like they were made from some kind of crystal. She held a heavy-looking case in one hand, and her other hand was pressed against the side of the craft, as if she was trying to steady herself. Her face was calm but tired, and her eyes— Daniel couldn't quite explain it. They seemed to hold tiny sparks of starlight. He approached carefully, not wanting to startle her. "Hey!" he called out, his voice friendly but cautious. "Do! You need help?" The woman looked at him, and for a brief second he felt as if she was looking not just at him, but through him, like she could see everything he had ever done in his life. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she adjusted her grip on the case and tried to pull it free from the sand. It was clear she was struggling. Without thinking twice, Daniel stepped forward. "Here, let me give you a hand," he said. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly, as though deciding if she could trust him. Finally, she gave a small nod. Together, they pulled the case from the sand. It was heavier than Daniel expected, and the surface felt warm, almost alive. He wanted to ask what it was, but something about the woman's quiet, serious manner made him keep the question to himself. "Thanks," she said softly. Her voice was calm and smooth, but there was a strange accent in her words, like she had learned English from someone who had never set foot on Earth. "You're welcome," Daniel replied, glancing at the damaged craft. "What happened to your, vehicle?" "It broke," she said simply. She didn't explain more, but Daniel could see that several panels were cracked and faint blue sparks flickered inside the openings. It was definitely not a kind of machine he had ever seen in his life. "Looks like the power system's fried," he muttered, examining the side. "If you want, I can tow it back to my workshop and take a look. I can't promise I can fix it, but I'll try." The woman studied him for a moment, then gave a small smile, barely noticeable but enough to show a hint of relief. "Yes," she said quietly. Daniel hurried back to his workshop to get his old tow truck. It rattled and groaned as it crossed the sand, but he managed to hook the craft to the back. The whole way, the woman sat silently in the passenger seat, her gaze fixed on the fading horizon. He tried making small talk. "So, where are you from?" She paused for a long moment before answering. "Far away," Daniel chuckled. "I guessed that." She didn't laugh, but her eyes softened slightly, as if she appreciated the lightness in his tone. When they arrived at the workshop, Daniel guided the craft inside. The woman stepped in slowly, glancing at the shelves filled with tools, spare parts, and half-repaired engines. She didn't seem impressed or unimpressed, more like she was observing everything carefully. Daniel got to work right away, opening one of the panels on her craft. The inner workings were beyond anything he'd ever seen. Thin, glowing tubes, spinning crystal spheres and strands of metal that seemed to pulse like veins. He had no idea what half of it did, but he recognized damage when he saw it. The energy core was cracked, and without a replacement, the craft wasn't going anywhere. "You must be part of some advanced space program," Daniel guessed. "This isn't any kind of ship I've seen." The woman didn't answer. Instead, she walked around the workshop, lightly touching a few objects as if trying to understand them. She stopped at a small photograph of Daniel with his late father. "Taken years ago. You fix things," she said simply. Daniel looked up from the ship. "That's right. I've been fixing machines since I was a kid." She nodded slightly, as if confirming something in her mind. "Then you can help me." Daniel grinned. "That's what I'm here for." As the night settled in, he worked, by the dim light of his lamps, carefully studying the strange machinery. The woman stayed close by, watching silently. Every so often he caught her looking at him, not in suspicion, but with a strange mix of curiosity and respect. He didn't know who she really was. To him, she was just a traveler in trouble. He had no idea that she was more than just another stranger. No idea that the tired woman in the silver cloak was, in fact, the richest and most powerful woman in the galaxy. A ruler whose name was spoken with awe on thousands of worlds. All Daniel knew was that someone needed help, and helping was simply the right thing to do. Daniel didn't stop working that night. The desert air outside had grown cold, but inside the small workshop, the warm yellow light from the hanging lamps made it feel safe and steady. The woman sat quietly at a corner table, her silver cloak draped over her shoulders. She didn't say much, only watching as Daniel moved from one part of the strange craft to another. He carefully unscrewed a panel from the side of the ship and pulled out a set of strange, glowing tubes. The light inside them pulsed gently, like the rhythm of a heartbeat, but one of them had gone completely dark. "This here's your problem," Daniel said, showing her the dark tube. "It's part of your power system. Without it, you're not going anywhere." The woman leaned forward slightly, studying it with sharp eyes. "Can you fix it?" she asked in her calm, steady voice. Daniel scratched the back of his neck. "Fix it? Not exactly, but maybe I can find something close enough to keep you flying. It won't be perfect, but it might hold until you get real repairs." She gave a small nod as though that answer was good enough. Then, after a long pause, she asked, "Why are you helping me?" Daniel stopped working for a moment, surprised by the question. "Because you need help," he said simply. "Isn't that reason enough?" She tilted her head slightly, as if his answer was strange or rare. "Most people would ask for payment first, or a reward." Daniel chuckled and went back to work. "Well, I'm not most people. I like fixing things. And I figure if someone's stuck in the middle of the desert with a busted, whatever this is, they probably need a hand more than they need someone bargaining with them." The woman watched him for a while longer, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said softly, "Where I am from, help without cost is unusual." Daniel shrugged. "Maybe where you're from, but around here folks still help each other. At least I try to." Hours passed. Daniel dug through his shelves and drawers, pulling out old parts from broken machines, tiny power regulators from hoverbikes, fragments of old communication satellites, even a few crystal components he had found years ago and never figured out how to use. Slowly, he began to piece together a temporary replacement for the damaged core. While he worked, the woman moved quietly around the workshop, studying things she didn't recognize. She stopped by the window, looking out at the night sky. The stars were bright over the desert, thousands of them scattered like tiny lanterns. She stared at them for a long time, and Daniel noticed her expression soften. "You like the stars?" he asked, still focused on his tools. "They are familiar," she said, "though I have never seen them from here before." Daniel smiled. They look different everywhere you go. My dad used to say the stars are like people. You meet them in different places, and they never shine quite the same. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment. Your father was wise. Daniel didn't respond right away. He was thinking about the man who had taught him to repair engines, to be patient, to treat people kindly no matter who they were. His father had been a simple man, but to Daniel he had been the best kind of person. By midnight, Daniel had finished assembling the new core. It wasn't pretty. Several of the parts were held together with old clamps and bits of wire, but it pulsed faintly with light. He carefully slid it into place inside the ship, connecting the strange glowing tubes until they all lit up in a steady rhythm. The woman stepped closer, watching him attach the last wire. The ship gave a soft hum, like a deep breath being taken after a long time. That should hold, Daniel said, wiping his hands on a rag. At least until you can find the proper part. She studied him for a long moment. You have given me more than I asked for. Daniel raised an eyebrow. I'm pretty sure you didn't ask for anything. She almost smiled. Exactly. Then she reached into her cloak and pulled out a small, round object. It was a coin, though Daniel wasn't sure if coin was the right word. It was about the size of a large button, made of a strange, golden metal that seemed to glow faintly from within. In the center was an engraving of a star with 7 points. She placed it in his hand. What's this? Daniel asked, turning it over in the light. A token, she said simply. It may be valuable one day. Daniel gave a small laugh. Well, I don't know about that, but I'll keep it. He slipped it into his pocket without another thought. The woman glanced at the ship, then at him. I will leave soon. Daniel nodded. I figured. Wherever you're going, I hope the repairs hold. She looked at him for a moment longer as if she wanted to say something else, but instead she only said, Thank you, Daniel. He blinked. I didn't tell you my name. Her eyes held his for a moment, then she stepped toward the craft. You didn't have to. Before Daniel could respond, she was already inside. The hum of the ship grew louder, and a faint blue glow surrounded it. In seconds, the craft lifted gently from the ground. Daniel stepped outside, watching as it rose into the night sky, the desert wind swirling around him. With a soft flash of light, the ship was gone, vanishing into the darkness as if it had never been there. Daniel stood alone in the quiet desert night, his hands still smelling faintly of machine oil, the strange golden coin warm in his pocket. He had no idea who she really was. No idea that his act of kindness had just been noticed, far beyond Earth. He only knew he had helped someone who needed it, and for him, that was enough. The days after the strange woman's visit felt strangely quiet to Daniel. Life in the desert usually moved at the same slow pace, fixing broken farm vehicles, repairing water pumps, and doing small jobs for the townsfolk. But now, his thoughts kept drifting back to that silver-cloaked traveler and her glowing-eyed ship. Sometimes at night, he would take the golden coin out of his pocket and hold it up to the light. No matter how dim the lamp, the metal still glowed faintly, as if it carried its own light from somewhere far away. He turned it over again and again, wondering what the 7-pointed star meant. He didn't know why, but he couldn't bring himself to put the coin away for long. It was the only proof that the strange night had really happened. For a week, nothing unusual happened, until the first ship appeared. It was just past midnight when Daniel heard a deep, rumbling sound from outside. At first, he thought it was a storm rolling over the desert, but when he stepped outside, the sky was clear and full of stars. Then he saw it, a dark shape gliding silently across the sky. It wasn't like any aircraft from Earth. Its outline was sharp and smooth, and along the sides were lines of light that shifted like running water. Daniel stood in the sand, watching as the ship passed overhead. It didn't land, didn't slow down, just moved across the sky and vanished beyond the horizon. The next day, more strange things started happening. A man Daniel had never seen before came into his workshop carrying a box. The man wore a long coat that looked too heavy for the desert heat, and his eyes seemed to flicker strangely in the sunlight. Without a word, he placed the box on Daniel's workbench and walked out. Inside the box were tools unlike any Daniel had ever used, sleek silver instruments that seemed to hum softly when touched. They were clearly designed for machines far more advanced than anything he had worked on before. Then came the merchants. 1. Afternoon, a woman from the other side of town arrived, pushing a cart piled high with rare metals, titanium, iridium, and even a piece of what looked like pure crystal. Daniel shook his head, telling her he couldn't afford to buy any of it, but she just smiled, saying, "These are already paid for. They're yours now," before walking away. Over the next few days, people Daniel didn't recognize began passing through town. They didn't stay long, and they always seemed to glance toward his workshop before leaving. Their clothing was strange, their accents even stranger. Daniel didn't understand any of it. Why would strangers bring him rare materials and advanced tools? Why did unfamiliar ships keep appearing in the night sky? What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that far beyond Earth, his name was being spoken on planets he had never seen. In the great halls of the trade worlds, whispers spread about the mechanic who helped Her Majesty without asking for a single thing. The woman he had helped was not just any traveler. She was the empress of all trade worlds, the richest and most powerful woman in the galaxy. She controlled the flow of goods, resources, and wealth across thousands of planets. Her word could start or end wars. And now she had placed Daniel's name on something called the List of Eternal Allies, a registry known only to the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Those on the list were protected, rewarded, and watched over for the rest of their lives. Back on Earth, Daniel remained completely unaware of his new status. One evening, while locking up the workshop, he found a folded piece of paper wedged under the door. The writing was unlike any alphabet he knew, sharp, curved lines that glowed faintly in the dark. Somehow he could read it, as if the meaning slipped directly into his mind. "Your kindness is known. You are under the eye. Do not be afraid." Daniel read the message 3 times, his skin prickling. He didn't know who had left it, but the words gave him both comfort and unease. Later that week, another ship appeared, this time landing on a ridge just beyond town. Daniel climbed the hill to see it more clearly. It was small, only the size of a large truck, but its design was unlike the silver-cloaked woman's ship. The pilot stepped out, a tall figure in a deep green uniform, with eyes that glimmered like copper in the sunlight. "You are Daniel," the pilot said, not asking but stating. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, who are you?" The pilot placed a small metal case on the ground between them. "This is a gift for the one who aided the sovereign." Before Daniel could ask what sovereign meant, the pilot was already back inside the ship. Moments later, the craft lifted into the air and vanished into the sky. Inside the case, Daniel found a device no bigger than his hand. It had no buttons, no screens, only a smooth, mirrored surface that showed not his reflection, but swirling images of places he didn't recognize. Oceans of green fire, mountains that floated in mid-air, cities hanging among the clouds. Daniel didn't tell anyone about the device or the coin or the strange visitors. He wasn't sure anyone would believe him, but deep down, he knew something was happening, something big. And somewhere in the galaxy, the woman he had helped was already making plans to see him again. The evening was quiet, and the air was cooler than usual. Daniel had just finished locking the workshop for the night when he noticed a strange glow spreading across the desert horizon. At first, he thought it was the setting sun lingering too long, but the light was not the warm gold of sunset. It was sharp and bright, with colors shifting from silver to deep blue. The ground beneath his feet began to hum softly, as though something massive was approaching from above. Daniel shaded his eyes and looked up. The stars were fading, swallowed by a golden light that grew larger and brighter until it filled the sky. Then, through the brightness, he saw it. A colossal ship, unlike any he had ever imagined. It wasn't just big, it was impossibly big. Its surface was covered in flowing designs that shimmered and changed shape, telling silent stories in light and shadow. The ship slowed, hovering high above the desert. From its underside, a smaller craft detached, descending like a glowing arrow, toward the ground. The air filled with a soft, musical vibration as it landed on the empty stretch of sand in front of his workshop. The ramp lowered, releasing a gentle wave of warm, sweet-smelling air. Daniel stepped back in awe as figures emerged. Tall guards in armor that gleamed like molten gold, their faces hidden behind smooth helmets. They carried long staffs tipped with crystals that glowed faintly, as though ready to unleash something powerful at a moment's notice. Between them, she appeared. It was the woman from that night. The same silver cloak, but now worn over armor that seemed to be made of woven light. The edges of her garments shifted colors like the wings of a hummingbird in sunlight. A thin crown rested lightly. On her head, not made of metal, but of something more like stardust bound together. Her eyes found Daniel instantly, and for the first time he saw her smile fully. "Daniel," she said, her voice carrying across the sand as though the air itself made way for it. Daniel blinked, still frozen in place. "You came back." She walked toward him, the guards following at a respectful distance. "Of course I did. I had to see the man who fixed my ship, the one who asked for nothing in return." He rubbed the back of his neck, feeling awkward. "I didn't think it was a big deal. You needed help." "To you, perhaps it was small," she said, stopping, just in front of him. "To me, it was everything." Daniel glanced past her at the towering golden ship still hanging in the sky. "You're not just a traveler, are you?" Her smile softened, but her eyes held something powerful. "No, Daniel. I am not just a traveler." She raised her hand slightly, and one of the guards stepped forward, holding a small, glowing sphere. With a touch, the sphere projected an image into the air. A vast view of space, filled with hundreds of shining worlds connected by streams of light. At the center of it all was a single golden star. "This," she said, "is my realm. I am the Empress of the trade worlds, ruler of more than 2,000 planets. I command the flow of goods, resources, and wealth across the galaxy. Entire civilizations rise and fall with my decisions." Daniel stared at the projection, his mind struggling to grasp it. "And you came here in a broken ship?" Her laugh was warm, almost human. "Even the most powerful are sometimes brought low by chance. I was on a journey that went wrong. But that night in the desert, you didn't see an empress. You saw a person in need. And you helped me." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "That is rare, Daniel. That is why I have come." Daniel looked down at the sand, feeling both proud and overwhelmed. "So, what now? You've got an army, a ship the size of a city, and I'm just a guy who fixes engines." "You are more than that now," she said firmly. "You are on the list of eternal allies. That means you are under my protection for the rest of your life. No harm will come to you without answering to me. And," her expression softened, You are invited to see my home, to walk among the stars not as a visitor, but as an honored friend." Daniel let out a slow breath. "You want me to come with you? To space?" "Yes," she said simply. "To see what few have seen, to stand where the skies burn with gold, where oceans sing, where markets float between moons. But I must also warn you, the galaxy is beautiful, but it is dangerous. You would be walking into a world of politics, rival powers, and those who would envy the favor you hold with me." Daniel's thoughts spun. He glanced at his workshop, the rusty tow truck parked outside, the shelves of worn tools, the half-finished projects. This was his whole life, safe, predictable, and small. The galaxy she spoke of sounded like a dream and a storm. The Empress watched him carefully, giving him time to think. "I do not command you," she said softly. "You have already done more for me than most ever would. But if you choose to come, your life will never be the same." Daniel met her gaze. There was no arrogance in her eyes, only honesty, and a spark of something else. Gratitude. The desert wind stirred between them, carrying the faint hum of the great ship above. Daniel knew that whatever choice he made would change everything. Daniel stood there for a long moment, the wind brushing against his face, carrying the faint hum of the massive golden ship above. His mind was torn between two worlds, the small, quiet life he knew so well, and the boundless, unknown universe waiting beyond the stars. The Empress didn't rush him. She simply stood in silence, her golden armor glinting softly under the desert moonlight. Her eyes calm but filled with meaning. "I've lived here my whole life," Daniel finally said, glancing at his workshop. "I know every squeaky floorboard in that place, every sound the pipes make when the wind hits. It's safe. I understand it. But—" he paused, looking back at her. "If I stay, I'll always wonder what I missed." The Empress's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Then perhaps it is time to see what waits beyond." Daniel let out a slow breath. "All right," he said. "I'll come." Her smile deepened, and she turned slightly to signal her guards. Two of them stepped forward, carrying a smooth black case. They opened it, revealing a suit made of light, woven into thin, flexible fabric. It shimmered with colors that shifted like oil on water. "This will keep you safe in places where the air is not like your Earth," the Empress explained. "It will also protect you from the cold of the void." Daniel took the suit carefully. It was lighter than he expected, warm to the touch. "Guess I'm getting an upgrade from my usual work overalls," he said with a small grin. She tilted her head in curiosity. "Overalls?" "Never mind," Daniel chuckled. They walked together, toward the small craft waiting on the sand. The guards moved aside, giving him space to board. As Daniel stepped onto the ramp, he looked back one last time at his workshop. In the pale moonlight, it looked smaller than he remembered. He thought about the people in town, about the quiet, days and dusty sunsets, and knew this was a goodbye. Not forever, but for a long while. Inside the craft, the air was cool and clean, carrying a faint scent of something like rain on stone. The walls glowed softly, as if the light came from the material itself. The seats were shaped to fit perfectly, and the controls looked nothing like Earth's, smooth surfaces with no buttons, only faint symbols that pulsed under the pilot's hands. The Empress sat beside him as the ship's engines began to hum. "Are you ready?" she asked. Daniel looked out the window at the endless night sky. "Ready as I'll ever be." The craft lifted gently, the ground falling away beneath them. The workshop, the town, the desert, all of it shrank quickly until it was just a dark patch in the golden glow of the landing site. The larger ship loomed above, its size even more staggering now. The small craft glided smoothly into an opening, in its underside like a bird returning to its nest. When they stepped out, Daniel had to stop and stare. The interior of the golden ship was vast, so large it felt like a city inside. Towering columns of crystal light reached toward a ceiling that looked like the night sky itself. Walkways stretched in every direction, and he could see beings of all shapes and sizes moving about. Some wore robes that seemed to ripple like water, others carried strange instruments, and a few floated above the ground entirely. "Welcome to the Aurora Crown," the Empress said. "It will be your home until we reach my world." Daniel followed her through the grand corridors. Everywhere they went, people, or whatever passed for people, paused to bow or touch a hand to their chest as the Empress passed. Some looked at Daniel curiously, as if trying to guess why a human from a small desert town walked beside their ruler. They entered a chamber with walls that shifted like moving glass. At the center was a large window that opened into the vastness of space. Daniel felt his breath catch. The earth was below them now, a glowing blue and white sphere surrounded by the black sea of the universe. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "Yes," the Empress agreed, "but it is only one of many." She gestured toward the stars. "Every point of light you see is a place, some full of life, some quiet and empty, some dangerous beyond imagining. And soon you will see them with your own eyes." For hours, Daniel walked through the ship, guided by the Empress. She showed him the gardens filled with plants from worlds where sunlight was green, the markets where merchants traded not with money but with songs, and the great library that stored knowledge from civilizations older than Earth itself. As they neared the ship's command deck, Daniel turned to her. "Why me? You must have thousands of people who work for you, who would follow any order you gave. Why bring me along?" The Empress stopped and looked at him, her gaze steady. "Because when I had nothing, no ship, no guards, no crown, you saw me as someone worth helping. Not as an empress, not as a ruler, but as a person. In my world, that is rare, and rare things must be kept close." Daniel didn't know what to say. The hum of the ship filled the silence between them. Finally, she gestured toward the stars beyond the glass. "This journey will change you, Daniel, and in time, you may change the galaxy in ways neither of us can yet see." He looked out at the endless darkness sprinkled with light, his heart beating faster. The adventure had already begun, and whatever awaited him out there, he knew one thing for certain: his life would never be small again. The golden ship turned slowly in the void, leaving Earth behind. Ahead, the stars stretched out like a promise, and Daniel, once just a desert mechanic, was now a traveler among them. And somewhere deep inside, he wondered just how far a single act of kindness could truly reach.